you could just introduce yourself, who you are and what do you do?
I'm Ramanjaneyulu, working as an agriculture scientist with Center for Sustainable Agriculture in Hyderabad. We work with small and marginal farmers across the country, trying to help farmers to move into more sustainable production systems and organize themselves so that they can better engage with the markets and also with the public policy, so that they can get better support from the governments. And we also work on policy related issues which are impacting on farmers.
I just want to go back like 10-15 years when you really started. Why did you choose agriculture, and why did you enter into this field?
Choice of studying agriculture was not much a choice, I would say. I got into agriculture because I didn't want to become a doctor. So that's how I got into agriculture, with a biology background. So agriculture was one of the choices. But after getting into agriculture, I understood the way things happen in agriculture, and that's the time when actually the Indian agriculture was making a big shift. Large number of farmers' suicides began in '86. That's the year when I joined actually BSc Agriculture. So whatever we study in college and then what we read in the newspapers, there was a lot of contradictions which we used to see. So I was trying to understand in the college I felt there is a lot of technology available for farmers, but when we see at the field level that it's not functional kind of thing. So that contradictions we were trying to look at and then try and understand what to do. That's one thing which actually created an interest in terms of understanding agriculture more and more. And I had a passion to get into Indian civil services at that time. So I thought a good public policy will help farmers. So I thought I should get into that. But unfortunately, by the time I completed my PhD, I thought that's not where my skills lie or my experience lies. So I thought I should get into research and work with farmers. So that's a major shift which has happened after my PhD. And after getting into civil services, then I decided I'll work with farmers directly. So got into agriculture research. There again I worked for about 8 years in the research institution, and then moved on.
But I think it sounds like more than your passion for the field is now, the agriculture and the people on the ground are benefiting from your work too. But I still want to go back to that agriculture topic, because the students today, right, and the youth who have the choice of choosing a field in the place of India current, where the services industry and the industry, other fields are more lucrative for them to get into, and you probably in your student life you chose this path of agriculture. But was there any personal resistance from your family or circle? Hey, why are you doing agriculture? Why not you go and study IT or get into an industry?
Not much. Fortunately, from a family side, I never had a problem. So all along, even within agriculture, to get into a particular subject or get into a particular profession kind of thing, I always made my choices. So I always felt more informed choices are good. In India, the problem today is there is no environment where the students can take more informed choices. They are pushed into a system where they have to follow an established path kind of thing. And I work very closely with education system, because that's another area which I have interest. Apart from agriculture, the education system is there. And I don't hesitate to say India doesn't have an education system. India only has an examination system. All along students are prepared to write an exam, and so the orientation is only to write an exam, and even to get into a job, it's again an exam. So it's not, again, they never look into your passion or your skills. It's basically whether you can answer 10 questions and whether you can make a right choice between 4 multiple choices. So that's how your selections are. So students are always made to learn that. So unfortunately that's a problem, and agriculture sector is greatly affected because of that. And I would say rest of the sectors as well. So if you look at not much innovations happen because of that.
That definitely is a broader problem, and there is a lot of players and important institutions need to come together to solve it. But what is your suggestion, or how should one approach this problem to fix this? I mean, or to start moving in the right direction?
See, education system should be more knowledge intensive, where people can understand and make a right choice. So it's about improving the decision making behavior of the person. I think that's how education system should be, but today that's not the case.
So I think we were talking about agriculture and how you got into it and your interest in general, but I was just trying to learn myself, and I was reading some articles about in the GDP of India, where how much of that is agriculture contributing, and I'm not sure about the accuracy, but at least it seems like the trend from the 1950 to now, it has gone down more.
Today it is around 15%.
15%, yes.
Yeah, 14 to 15 is what it's talked about. But it's also more to do with how GDP is measured as well.
Okay.
What is GDP? It's about the goods which are transacted in the market. Say 40% of the people produce their own food and eat, that's never considered as a contribution.
Right.
And the whole GDP contribution from agriculture, even when it is calculated, it is looked at only the farm produce which is sold by the farmers. But the entire textile industry, if you look at in India, is based on the cotton. And unless the cotton is produced, textile industry will not run. Indirectly, that's also should be part of the GDP calculation. If you look at the entire food industry, or if you look at the entire alcohol and several other products which comes out of agriculture. So there is a lot which one need to look into. Second important issue, the other dimension also is that, say 55% of the people in India depend on agriculture, directly and indirectly. Directly, I would say 55% directly depend on agriculture. Investments from the government made in agriculture is around 2.5%. And the contribution is about 15%. So if government is investing around 2.5%, and if the returns are about 15%, I would say if that sector is providing employment for 55% and contributing 15% to the GDP, which other sector is doing that? Look at IT, look at film industry, look at any other sector, how much investments are made by the government, directly, indirectly. Indirectly in terms of tax exemptions, if you look at it, it's huge. And investments in terms of creating infrastructure, it's huge, but returns and employment opportunities, very little.
I mean, the food is the most simplest form to understand, and the importance of that, and agriculture is that main field. And it's so surprising and alarmingly, sad in that sense, that why is there no investment? Why is there no push to take it forward?
See, the problem is not about lack of understanding about food. It's about lack of understanding about farmers. In the entire food supply chain, the weakest link is the farmers, and these are all small and marginal farmers who largely come from the downtrodden communities in the country, and nobody is their priority. I think they are not priority for anyone. I think that's where actually the problem lies. So their incomes, their livelihood, their issues are not priority for anyone, and they are not organized. So that's another problem. So that's where if you look at any public policy in the country, including agriculture policies, they are all based on consumers and urbanites, but not based on the farmers or the rural communities.
I want to go back to understand a little bit from you what is the story of CSA, how you went about starting it, and can you take us back to that time when you started it?
See, it was in 95, 96, around that time. I was preparing for my civil services, and I got selected, and during the process of preparation and then during the examination system, the interviews in civil services and all, I felt it is too bureaucratic and that system is not going to help anyway. And I also understood a lot about the Indian economy, how it is driven by how policy drives it and what is happening and all. And that's the time when a lot of debate was going on in India about the WTO and then its impact on agriculture kind of thing. So considering and trying to understand all that, I thought I should get into agriculture and then continue with farm. So that's where I got into agriculture. And after getting into it, and during that period actually I had lot of connections with the farmers organizations. So I was trying to bring in the perspective from the technology and also from the economy, how to understand it in the right perspective kind of thing. Otherwise much of the debates till that time were political. So they always used to analyze from a political point of view rather than looking into the technology and economics point of view kind of thing. And that association with farmers organizations, even while I was in research, made me to work very closely with many not-for-profit organizations also in India. And I was also trying to look at what are the various innovations happening in the country, and much of the innovations happening outside the institutions. So non-institutional innovations, informal and non-formal innovations happening in agriculture. So that's the area which I was trying to explore and all. In 97, for the first time, after there was a large number of farmer suicides. So like I said, 86, 87 was the first spate of farmer suicides in India. That's the time when I joined my BSc Agriculture and all. 96, 97 was the second spate of farmer suicides. Again, this time it happened around Warangal, Karimnagar districts of Telangana. And there was a small group which came together to try and understand what is the problem. How do we understand this? So I was also part of the study team. So we went around, and then once we came back, we were trying to explain how to understand the problem and why cotton farmers were committing suicides. And the interest also came in from a group which was also working on cotton weavers, basically weavers, because weaving community also was committing suicides. So if you look at the entire textile industry, cotton producers and weavers both were committing suicides, but the textile industry is growing. Seed industry, so cotton seed industry was growing, textile industry was growing, and but the large chunk of people who are depending on cotton production and cotton weaving were dying. So this study group was trying to understand all this, and that association also brought an analysis in terms of even from my side also, that how technology has to be reoriented kind of thing. And again I would say the last straw in this whole thing was the field trials were happening with the GM crops at that time in the farmers field. So when we were doing all this, we found in the farmers field there were field testing of unapproved cotton varieties were happening, and when we picked it up and then went to the government doesn't know, regulatory bodies doesn't know. So there was a lot of debate about whether the BT cotton should be permitted, not permitted kind of thing. So all that made us to think through that we need to have an organization which works on this in a more scientific way. So rather than as a not-for-profit organization which works as a charity organization, we thought we should have a very professional organization which works to build a scientific understanding of agriculture, which can build the proper support systems which can help farmers to sustain their livelihood. So that's where the journey began. So when we thought through, I thought I'm too young to take up that responsibility, because I just joined my job and I was in my early 30s kind of thing. So we searched actually for someone who can help us to lead the organization for a couple of years, but we couldn't get. And I also thought I should not wait till my retirement to get into this. So that's how 2004 again. The third spate of farmer suicides began in 2004. So after 97, 2004, huge. Actually, it was around 4,000 in Andhra Pradesh, 1 year, and government actually collapsed, and then all that happened during that time. So we thought we should just take risk and then start off an organization. But from 98 to 2004, informally we were trying to work with several not-for-profits in terms of establishing alternatives. So that we continued working on. So pulling up all that learnings and experiences, 2004 we started as a Center for Sustainable Agriculture. And one of the very first thing we thought of doing is we should engage with the governments. I think we should not ignore government. So, we should actually engage with the government so that whatever models we are establishing can get into a larger scale. That was the purpose right from the beginning itself. So, 2004 itself, when we started, we engaged with the government of Andhra Pradesh, and that's where our journey began actually.
So I think I've personally looked at the CSA-INDIA website, and then you have talked about it in other forums online too. But if you want to just tell our audience about what is the mission of CSA, in just summarize in few words, what does CSA meant to do, and how are you approaching it differently?
So the main purpose of the organization is to make agriculture economically and ecologically viable. I think that's the main purpose of it. So the farmers' livelihood should become economically viable, and agriculture should become ecologically viable as well, because today largely agriculture is resource depleting, and the groundwater resources or soil fertility, huge depletion, energy. So it's high energy intensive, high water intensive, high chemical intensive kind of thing. So we need to move into more ecological production systems. I think that's there is no escape from that. When it will happen, how it will happen is only a matter of time. But that's the final shift which global agriculture has to make. Second is in the process of production, farming should become economically viable, and small and marginal farmers agriculture is the only way. The large scale large farm agriculture has its own limitations. So that's again is an issue, particularly in a country like India, where soil varies, weather varies for every inch. So smallholder agriculture is more viable there, but it is not viable today because of the policy disorientation. So how do we bring that back in the right track so that it can support small and marginal farmers? That's the mission of organization.
I think I know you presented a people angle to it, and that there were those 3 different decades or times when we were losing lives. That's one angle of that, and there is this other angle of agriculture and the field itself to to be more efficient and fixing the problems on the ground. But what is your view on why should we do this now? I mean, if we don't do this now, what are we losing? Like, what would you say for that?
See, the 2 things. One we need to understand. One is from an economic dimension at the national level. Second is about people themselves, right? Today, either if you take the national level, India, or if you take global level, one single largest reason for deaths and illnesses is food. Food which we all eat to live is the one which is killing people also. So we need to get out of that. So why this? So we need to move into more healthy food systems. I think that's no escape on that front. So that we need to make. Second, if you look at particularly India, where 55% of the people depend on agriculture, many successive governments in the last 3 decades were talking about high density of population in agriculture and then moving them out of agriculture kind of thing. But where do you move them out? Where do you move them out? And what is the other sector which can provide such opportunity? And what are the investments government is making to create that? If you look at, it's not there. So one way even to help farmer, help this large number of people depending on agriculture to move out of agriculture is also to make it viable. If agriculture becomes viable, they get their children educated, and then they move out by getting good opportunities outside. But today that's not the case. There is a perpetual poverty happening. So not only in India, if you look at globally, more than half of poor are farmers. So one single profession which all poor in the world are doing is agriculture. That's because somehow world believes food should be cheaper, and the only people who are in food trade will make money, not the people in production.
It is unfortunate that where the cost of other goods in life like cars, houses, real estate have gone up, But you're saying the rate of the cost of the food is still
is still cheap, very cheap, and that's where actually the problem lies.
You said you have seen farmers are so much interested in continuing to do their farming, and they want to retain it if given a choice. And you've worked with so many villages. Did you come across any interesting and innovative solutions that they themselves have founded?
Many. See, today we are working in about 7 states directly, and then indirectly in another 7 states. So, it is about 14 states where we are working with more than 1 lakh farmers. And we found lot of innovations coming up at the farmers level, and then we try and pick them up and then refine them so that it can be applied in other growing conditions. So, lot of innovations comes up. So, I was part of many teams going and talking to other farmers, other areas about this experience, and many people got inspired, and then they were trying to adapt those things. And we were also trying to use this village as a case to discuss about pesticides, to discuss about the GM crops, the BT cotton which was introduced, how this is a better option of growing crops without using pesticides rather than pesticides and GM crops. That is the work which we were trying to do. In the process, we came across a village in Maharashtra where farmers, after they went bankrupt, highly indebted, they decided to sell off a village, entire village. So, they listed out the entire lands, all their assets, and they said we are going to sell off the village, and then they put up a board in the village. And fortunately, we were there nearby town, Varda. Varda is a nearby town. So, we were discussing about how farmers issues can be addressed, particularly from the technology point of view kind of thing. So, when we saw this news, we thought we should go and talk to the farmers, and when we went and saw, it was a very desperate situation. So, farmers have no escape kind of thing, they were indebted, and then they wanted to move out. So, in the discussion we were asking them, what do you want to do? So, they were saying, if somebody buys it, then we can go out. If no one buys, what do we do? Second is, should we actually leave and go, or should we try and figure out solutions? So, that is the discussion which has happened with them. Then I shared our own experiences where farmers could move out of high input intensive agriculture towards a low input intensive agriculture kind of thing. Then they said they will also would be interested to come and understand, talk to them. So, they came to the village, and then after talking to farmers in Punukula, they decided we will also try it out. So, that is where actually the journey began in 2006 in that village called Dorli. This is Dorli, village name is Dorli. And 2005, it is very well written, well documented, that story is well documented. Many national, international magazines carried story about the village. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited and then he had discussion with the farmers over there in a nearby village called Vaifat. And they also, we were saying there should be a fundamental shift in the way agriculture is done. And these farmers started, but the government has not started, and government again has invested a lot of money in terms of supporting agriculture. And 10 years down the lane, if you look at in 2016, nothing could happen actually. From 2006 to 2016, whatever government investments were made there, not much happened. But the work which we did in those villages, in 2014 we got the Best Rural Innovation Award, where all farmers could move back to agriculture. They repaid their loans, and they gave up their pesticide use, and today the village has a producer company owned by farmers which produces seeds and then sells to the neighboring villages. So, that shift happened by working out a very localized solution. So, the complexity of agrarian crisis today, while it looks very big and mammoth kind of thing, but solutions can be very simple. It could be very localized solutions can be worked out. And what keeps us going also is the farmers' enthusiasm. I have seen everywhere, wherever I go and talk to the farmers, even in midst of such a deep crisis, they are trying to innovate. They are trying to find alternatives on their own. Many of them do not want to leave if there is an option. while many people talk about saying people want to leave farming, I would say given a choice farmers want to be in farming unless they are pushed out kind of thing. So, one of the major national sample survey into I think it was in 2004, it says given an option 80% of the farmers want to leave farming, that is what the report says. Wherever I go people say that say 80% of the farmers want to leave farming, only 20% want to stay back. But you go and ask any university how many students want to be in India and continue their work, I would say 100% want to leave. Go and talk to any teacher, how many of them want their children to be teachers? No one. Talk to any agricultural research scientist, how many of agricultural research scientists want their children to become agricultural scientists? No one. Except for the film stars and probably big businessmen, nobody wants their children to be in their own profession. What is wrong in that? So, agriculture need to be understood very differently. So, that is what we were trying to do. So, in terms of technology, in terms of understanding the community and their relation with the resources. So, that is again a major problem. Today, while I am talking about say 55% farmers depend on agriculture, near about 100 million farmers in India do farming only in about 100 million hectares, which essentially means about 1 hectare is what the land they have and a small piece of land, and near about 20-30% of them are tenant farmers, they do not own land. So, it is a leased in land, and there is no mechanism of identifying these tenant farmers. So, all benefits which government gives for farming goes to the landowner, not to the people who are actually cultivating. So, that is another social dimension of the problem which is surfacing for last I would say 10-15 years. Yeah.
I think you summarized it pretty well in terms of at least that village story. And I was just going to follow up in with the question of what is the state of the farmers, and what are the, if you paint us a picture of what are the distress, the challenges that they are facing today.
The major distress is about the incomes. The average income of farmer today is around 5,000 rupees per month, and so the average income of the 100 million farmers is around 5,000 rupees a month, and their expenditure is around 6,500. So, that is where actually the crisis lies. And even the current government after coming into power in 2014 made a statement actually, and then has kept a big challenge, is what as Prime Minister talks about, an ambitious target of doubling the income in the next 7 years. And so, from 5,000 rupees to move to 10,000 rupees, they have to wait for 7 years is what government says, and they call it as ambitious. And if you look at 10,000 rupees today, at today's cost, 18,000 rupees is the minimum living income which someone needs to live, and they have to wait almost 20 years to get that. So, that is the situation in India. So, how do we increase incomes of the farmers is the key thing. And while incomes are lower, farmers are getting into a perpetual indebtedness by borrowing. So, you borrow with an expectation that you get an income, you do not get it, and debt accumulates, and again you borrow, again you borrow. So, it is a vicious cycle of indebtedness into which farmers are getting into, and at no point of return they are committing suicides. In the last 20 years, official data shows more than 3 lakh farmers have committed suicide. This is an official data, and when we all could bring that to the notice of the media, and then we are fighting on that, government stopped publishing data. Instead of trying to solve the problem, they stopped publishing the data also. So, 2015 was the last year when the farmer suicide data was published, and 2016 they did not even publish it. And government is not trying to acknowledge the problem. When you do not acknowledge the problem, you will not understand it, and if you do not understand it, you cannot solve it. So, the solutions whatever government is trying to bring in is creating more and more problems than actually trying to solve the problem.
So, I think there is an economics here in terms of the salary that they are making, and then they are trying to keep up with the livelihood. what are some other costs that is making them so indebted and then putting them to the dire state of I'm going to commit suicide?
So, see, one of the major problem post 90s, what has happened is many states and center also changed their policies towards support services which are provided to the people. So, education, health and all are privatized post 90s if you see. So, the cost of living has gone up significantly. So, before 95 if you see, the cost of living is minimal because your health, education or your inputs, many of them are taken care by the government, but today everything you need to pay. So, that is one context which is there. Second thing is, within agriculture, the kind of support services which governments were providing in terms of extension services or subsidies, they have gone down significantly. And there is a major shift happened from supporting small farmers to big farmers. So, that shift and technological shift also created a problem in terms of increasing cost of cultivation. So, significant increase happened on the cost of production, but the prices have not gone up. So, when in a situation where your cost of production is going up, cost of living is going up and your incomes are not going up, you end up indebtedness.
In the field of agriculture, and specifically you talked about the training that you're doing, how much of knowledge are you giving to these farmers on the climate change and their actions impacting that space? Are you including any curriculum?
Yes, we have a very large program just began in Andhra Pradesh, which is a continuation of work which we did in Maharashtra almost for last 5 years. At the village level, we created systems where people will understand the weather parameters, how they are changing daily. So, they make a documentation of that and its impact on farming, and they will also understand their actions and its impact on environment. So, both ways, because climate is impacted by farming and farming also is impacted by climate, both ways. So, how that relationship can be understood and right choices can be made is what is the work which we try to do. So, we established small weather stations in the village where people document and then try and understand that. And last year we began a work in Andhra Pradesh, which is a fairly large work with Andhra Pradesh government about promoting climate resilient natural farming. We call it as climate resilient natural farming, where farmer groups are trained about the pattern which I was talking about in terms of through farmer field schools to understand their ecosystem and make choices to move towards natural farming. Andhra Pradesh government has an ambitious target of completely moving to natural farming by 2027. Entire 1 crore acres which they have, they want to move. So, that is something which we are trying out. So, again that will not happen as a macro policy itself, unless it is converted into series of actions which can be done at the field level and building the capacities of the people to make right choices and providing support services. I think all these together will lead to that.
I think I want to speak about this program of yours from CSA, which is the CSA-INDIA, and how that came to be, and what is the, how are you thinking about expanding that to other parts of India?
Okay, see, when we are looking at the incomes of the farmers, so the like I said, prices being low is one of the key issues, and within that farmers, within the prices which consumer pays, the farmers share is very low. So, today on average it is around 20 rupees, 20% I would say. Say if some consumer buys rice at 60 rupees, farmer gets about 15 rupees of that. So, rest of it is spent very inefficiently and shared by many middlemen who add cost but not any value. So, we are trying to shorten the supply chain by organizing farmers into cooperatives and do value addition at their level and directly reach out to the consumers. So, it is a farmers and consumers cooperatives which we began in 2008. So that federation, that ecosystem is called Sahajaharam. So they brand it as Sahajaharam, and today Sahajaharam has more than 350 products which they sell. All are produced by farmers and farmer families in the rural areas, and currently we run it through 7 retail stores which we have in Hyderabad and Visakhapatnam, and will be expanding further as well. We are also trying to get consumers as part of the consumer cooperative to invest in the initiative, so that they also can be part of the ecosystem, both in terms of giving their knowledge and skills, and also in terms of financial investments. So that's the Sahajaharam model, and we hope we can reach out to large number of farmers through that, and we could increase the farmer share in the consumer's price to about 50% today. From about 20% we could increase it to about 50%, and I am sure in the next couple of years we will be reaching out to about 60 to 70% as well. By reaching out the volumes and then putting in more infrastructure facilities, I think we can do that.
I think you talked about the consumer. If they get to learn about this program and they want to participate, how do you advise how they can approach and what they should do?
We regularly do consumer awareness programs on 2 fronts. One, how to understand their food and then make right choices about it, and we also do nutritional counseling. So for various health related problems, how food can be a medicine. So food as a medicine is one large promotion which we do. So we do camps for children, we do camps for households in residential areas, in urban gatherings, we do that, and we engage with people. Another initiative which we began particularly from a climate change point of view and also nutrition point of view both, we are now building a kind of indexing where consumers can know what is the ecological footprint of the food before it reaches their plate. Say by the time food reaches my plate, what it has done to the environment is something which I need to also understand, and what that food does to me is something which people are now trying to understand, but what it has done to the environment or what it has done to the farmer who has grown it, these two are still distant pieces of information. Now we are trying to put it together and show to the consumer by buying this how much you have contributed to the farmer and how much you have contributed to the environment. So both we are trying to map and then bring it as an index onto the food packets which Sahajaharam sells.
Oh, interesting. And do you see that model, working and getting expanded to other products which is outside of Sahajaharam? Are you working with?
Yeah. So what we are trying out is to build an IT platform where any group can use this. The entire work which we are trying to do, we are trying to create an IT platform. Any group can use it. It need not be part of Center for Sustainable Agriculture itself. So, like say problem diagnosis at the farmers level. So we have built an application called e-Krishi Crop, where farmers or people working with farmers can diagnose their problem or diagnose their soils and then make a right choice. And the same platform can be used by any organization also. So that is something which we could do. Similarly, for the farmers cooperatives to manage, so we have built a platform for Sahajaharam, and we are now throwing it open for other cooperatives so that they can also use it to manage. And similarly, on this food traceability, we are building for Sahajaharam, but we will be opening it up for everybody else. Everybody can use it. So we believe in a open source development. So whatever we learn, we feel we have to give back to the people.
I'm glad you mentioned that term, because in the Silicon Valley and other place there is this trend about you build a cool technology and you open source it and give it to others, so others will also grow. And
one of the major initiatives on that line is also not only about IT being open sourced, we are working on seeds which are open sourced, where there is a group of farmers who are into conservation of traditional varieties, revival and conservation. There are also farmers who are evolving new varieties, and there are breeders who are doing that, and we have farmers cooperatives which also produce and sell seeds. So between them we have created an ecosystem where there is an open access for everyone, so nobody will have an exclusive right, and there is also an equitable benefit sharing on the profit which is created. So we call it as open source seed initiative, Apna beach means our seat, and we have now more than 35 varieties which are licensed under open source category in India, even in commercial crops like maize and cotton.
Are there? I think you already mentioned the usage of IT in your development of initiatives. Are there any actions that others can take to get engaged in this? Do you? So let's say if I'm remotely away from the local ground. As a consumer, how can I get involved? One is I'm learning about my food, but how do I get involved in your initiatives? Are there online hashtags or things like that?
So this entire initiative is called e-Krishi, and is built by a group of volunteers all over. See, one of the things which we also realized when we started CSA, when professionals like us came into agriculture and then trying to build a professional system, that made a big difference. Today there are no professionals working at the grassroots, there are no professionals working for marginal people at all, because all professionals are hired by big industry, so they build solutions for them. So nobody is building solutions for poor, no one is building solutions for marginal people, and if somebody is unable to afford to pay, they do not have a solution, that is it. So that is the situation. So one of the things we are trying out is to build, to get the skills pooled together. Say in your annual time, in a year, if you can give 10 days time, probably that will help somebody to acquire new skills. So that can be used. So we are trying to map several such volunteers who can give their skills. So rather than money, we are actually looking at people who can donate their skills. We are also now trying to build a platform where people can, this skill pool can be built. Like there are people who want skills, there are people who can actually donate skills. So we are trying to link them together, kind of thing. One more area we are trying to work on, particularly on agriculture, is to build a kind of public watch to look at how public investments are made and then what effects they are having on farmers' livelihoods, kind of thing. So a crowdsourced platform where people can do analysis of budgets by the governments, analysis of access to public services is done and then put it out. So that is one area which we are trying to work on, and that would be a remote support which can be provided to the farmers. We also run a helpline for farmers, it is called Kisan Mitra, where a group of people are always available on phone. People can call and then information is provided to the farmers immediately, and if you can't provide the information, we will get back to them, and we also take that information and then analyze and then put back to the government system so that it can function better. So both ways that system is working now.
I think in all this journey, right, whether it is cutting the cost of the farming production, or whether it is setting up these stores, or solving the problem which otherwise the government should have solved.
Yes.
You or your organization, did you feel resistance, or were you even threatened at some point? Was that a challenge?
Not much actually. See, the like I initially said, the whole purpose of CSA was to create an institution which can work for people, and every public institution should have done that job. See, today the crisis in India is because public institutions are failing to do their job. So what we thought is we should set up a model where if an institution can do its job in a right way, how things can change. So I think that is the whole idea of creating CSA, and then that is what we are trying to do. In terms of threats, we have not faced much, I would say. See, rather than threats, I would say non-cooperation we have seen a lot. As long as I am not talking against you, you will be happy to associate with me because I am bringing solutions for you. So Department of Agriculture was okay to work to some extent, but the moment we also started questioning them, they distanced themselves. Same is the case with livelihoods departments or politicians. So, we have seen all across that is an issue. But we continued to work with farmers directly and establish alternatives so that that is not questionable. And whatever data which we generate from the learnings which we had at the field level, much of it is independent data. So, it is not my report, it is some government report, some students report, some media reports. So, people cannot deny that. So that is one thing which is part of our planning itself.
If you have to summarize in your experience of research and study in agriculture, what does every state or as a country, what does India need to do, or steps that they need to take to improve the challenges in agriculture?
See, if you look at food and agriculture as two different things, entire agriculture should be farmer centric. It should be farmer centric in terms of how agriculture can provide decent livelihood for the people who are doing farming. I think the entire technology or the public policy, infrastructure investments are all should be around that. And when we are actually making choices of technology, choices of institutions, choices of research, innovations, we should also look at what kind of farmers we have, what is the socio-economic profile of farmers we have, and what is the ecosystem in which we are doing farming. So, based on that actually these choices have to be made. Unfortunately, we are not doing that. What we are doing is we are trying to get a technology and try to impose on the people and then say, oh, these are all small farmers who cannot adapt, or they say this is a very dryland area, so this will not work. All these people have small farms, so it will not work. Say, if I have to buy a car, I will buy based on my affordability and the road on which I am going to drive. Today, if you look at the harvesters which are used in India, they are designed for an average 1,000 acres farm in US, and they are now pushed on to farmers in India who has on average 1 hectare of land. So, how it is going to work? So, I think these choices are to be based on the farmers and their livelihoods. The choices about food, it should be based on the consumers. After all, food is consumed, right? So, you need to look at the health and nutrition of food, which is not there. So, both in farming and food, the priorities have changed a lot, and that is what is creating the problem.
So thank you for sharing all the stories, and I hope our path crosses again sometime in the future. And
thank you.
Wish you all the best in all the endeavor for CSA, and we are always looking to be of some service to you. So hopefully we'll work again together on a bigger
Sure.
project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.